Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, lamenting the advent of digital recording, or else a scrappy upstart, lamenting the inability to master an entire album via a smartphone app, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the first Friday of May 2022, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Gabriel who drove a Toyota 4Runner with a lift kit and an aftermarket radar detector, and who was always trying to sell you 100 copies of the movie Gattaca that he'd downloaded from the Pirates Bay. And old Gabriel would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music, and merch commission-free. Listeners to the Working Songwriter podcast can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm over on YouTube for Sunday Songs. That's a live stream. I'm live. I'm playing tunes live. I'm taking questions in the live chat. I'm taking requests in the live chat. It's a really fun, really interactive experience. I dare to say that we're building something of a community over there, including many people who are listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. That's the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern over on YouTube. Head on over to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab to set a reminder. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name. Then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time and capital to do that. Support the show over there at Patreon. I appreciate you very much. And if you're not in a place where you can contribute in that way, I totally understand. You could still help us out in two ways that are entirely free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store. Or second, you could simply tell a friend about the show. Spread the word about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there for this week. John Doe is a legend. I've been listening to his music for nearly 30 years now, and this was, needless to say, a privilege. I hope you enjoy our chat. Our Our guest this week has been a fixture in American popular music for the last 5 decades. John Doe got his musical start with the seminal Los Angeles punk outfit, X. He's gone on to have his own critically acclaimed recording career as a solo artist, as well as publishing poetry and even acting in film and television. After moving to LA in the mid-70s, Doe co-founded X, who would go on to release 2 albums that Rolling Stone would later rank in the top 500 American albums of all time. They became a real cultural phenomenon in California. When they played Cal State Fullerton, they caused the highest truancy rate in Orange County public school history. They would go on to appear on American Bandstand and David Letterman. Doe is a prolific collaborator, having recorded with Patty Griffin, Dan Auerbach, Amy Mann, Don Was, Kathleen Edwards, the Sadies, and many others. He's also appeared in over 50 films and television productions, with some of his most notable roles being in Roadhouse, Georgia, Roadside Prophets, Great Balls of Fire, and Roswell. The Boston Globe has recently said of his music, Doe is simply making some of the most striking music of his career. Rolling Stone has lauded his dirty rockabilly swagger, and American Songwriter has called him one of the most distinctive and passionate voices to emerge from any American punk band. I got a chance to catch up with him on the phone last week and hear about his iconic musical journey. All right. John Doe, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. I've always associated you with Los Angeles, and I suppose that's with good reason, but I was interested to learn and getting ready for this podcast. You were actually born in Decatur, Illinois.
Yep.
And so what did music look like in your household growing up there in the Midwest?
Well, actually, I only spent about 6 months in Decatur and then moved to Kingsport, Tennessee for my first 4 years, and then to Wisconsin for another 3. And then I think by third grade, I was in Baltimore, and I stayed in Baltimore until I moved out to California.
Right.
And I got out of LA proper probably 12 years after, just after my first daughter was born. And so that was like 89 or 90 when I put out the first solo record. But music in my household, my mom and dad liked long hair music, as in the classical style. My dad played classical piano just as a hobby. He was good though. I mean, he had a moment in his youth when he played some sort of receptions and whatever. I don't know. I remember one picture of him in a tuxedo at a piano, and my mom sang. She sang in college, like sang opera and stuff in college. So they didn't have any quote cool records, like zero cool records. I mean, not even like Frank Sinatra, which is sort of on the border of like cool and not cool. I don't know. Some people love Frank Sinatra. I think he's like, yeah, I got him. But they gave me folk records, which at this stage of the game are kind of important, given this latest record. So that was my musical history.
It's interesting. You mentioned that like your dad just as a hobby played classical piano, and it just makes me think like that was such a different generation that like, now I think of what, an average suburban dad's hobby would be, and it's not playing classical piano.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, he was anything but average, which I'm glad for. I mean, he had ambition. I believe that he transferred some of that ambition to my brother and myself, and yeah.
So, I mean, before we even get to you arriving fresh on the scene in Los Angeles, if there was literally no like pop music of any kind in your house growing up? How did you gravitate towards the music that you would eventually start
The
playing?
same as all the other people my age. It was the radio and, pop culture. And, I was in fourth or fifth grade when the Beatles and all that stuff happened. And then I was like 15 or 16 when I heard the Doors and FM radio became popular. So, and also Baltimore was a few years behind the time, several years behind the time. So they would still play like Chuck Berry and Little Richard and things like that. And then also James Brown had a radio station in Baltimore. I think he had 4 or 5 radio stations on the East Coast. So it was like turn on the radio. Pretty cool.
That was a different era of music. To think that James Brown would just own several radio stations in in a market. I mean, that's a different era of being a musician. Although he was pretty canny compared to most musicians.
He was bigger than shit. I mean, he went and he played the Civic Center downtown Baltimore. It was right around I'm Black and I'm Proud. And people were so revved up when they left, they just went out into the city and just broke whatever they could possibly put their hands on. And I remember I had pleaded with my mom, please take me down there, because she had taken us to see the Rolling Stones at the same place. I don't know, a little while before, but people just, went nutty. I don't think it was not like political protest rioting. It was just like, I just saw James Brown. I don't know what to do with myself. And so they broke a bunch of windows and shit like that. And so the city fathers banned James Brown to play Baltimore. And then James Brown turned around and bought the Holiday Inn that was like right next to the Civic Center, and put a picture of himself on like a headshot kind of thing, drawing of him with a microphone going like, typical, and renamed it the James Brown Holiday Inn. This was like, fuck you guys. I'm Black and I'm Proud. Which, that was not lost on me. The significance of that was like, cool. I loved it.
Now wait though, you mentioned there in that story that that your mom had taken you to the same place to see the Stones. So your folks, even though they weren't down with the cool music themselves, they were into you getting some exposure to it.
They were very liberal and a little bit elitist, unfortunately, but but they they looked down on a lot of people that were just in like your regular working class folks, which maybe was why it attracted me, because I would see those same people and think, well, wait a minute, they're good, hardworking people. But, they came from a pretty, they came from good Midwestern, like first generation. They were second generation, maybe. I mean, yeah. And so they wanted to reach higher, they got education and they got, they valued that. And Wisconsin, they both came from Wisconsin. Wisconsin is anything but cosmopolitan. So they kind of looked for that.
It's it's only cosmopolitan in a few of the places even now, and it's many years later. So, the Los Angeles that you would end up landing in, when I think of American music, there are half a dozen to a dozen like music scenes and eras that I think are really important and really iconic. And you landed in one of them, which was like the late 70s, early 80s Los Angeles punk music scene. Very formative for what American music would be going forward. What did it all look like on the ground at the time when you arrived?
It was just ready for a change. The Whiskey A Go-Go and the Starwood they had cover bands mostly. or disco. Disco, like DJs playing. So it was pretty wide open. That's why Brendan Mullen and The Mask was such a revelation. And, that was the end of 76 when I moved there. So, David Bowie and T-Rex and the Stooges and things had been kind of knocking at the door. MC5 and people like that have been knocking at the door. And, then Patti Smith put out Horses and CBGBs, and that whole scene was beginning to happen. And then, the English scene right after that. So it was like, here's the one of the media centers of the world, and there's no real scene and there's no real live music. So what do you think, Misfits?
Yeah.
People, not the band. What do you think? Do you want to, take advantage of this? And we did.
Yeah, it's almost like that there was a void that was always going to fill itself. Mm-hmm. Did you feel at the time, like, was there a cohesion where you felt like something of note was happening at the time, or is it just something that people can look back afterwards and realize?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, you had a sense of it, but nobody was really making much of a living or getting much notice. I mean, for a long time, LA was just looked down upon as like an also ran of New York and London. And, we were absolutely influenced by that scene, by both of those scenes. All the New York bands played the whiskey. So I think that was a stronger influence. And I went to New York before I moved to LA. I was pretty sick of the East Coast. It's a lot of negativity in the East Coast. I don't know if you noticed that, but the West Coast is like, fuck, you can do anything, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's definitely, I don't know how much it's true now in the internet era, but even as recently as 10 or 15 years ago, there was sort of like a self-selecting between people on the West Coast and the East Coast, their kind of temperaments. Although I'll be honest, I still live on the East Coast, and there's a lot of negativity here still. Yeah. You're right.
Anywho, so I think people had as much gratitude as a 20-something can have. We were happy and maybe grateful a little bit that there were, 150 other misfits like ourselves that were willing to, sustain the abuse that being a punk rocker in 1977 would be, which was astonishing to me. It's like, this is Hollywood, for Christ's sakes. It's like, isn't that where weirdos are supposed to go? Like, you're going to call me a fag because I have tight pants on? Okay, sure. Yeah. But it was just, people get threatened and they get scared and they don't know what's going on.
Well, what do you think it was about your character, though, that made you part of, only 150 people that wanted to do that? I mean, no one wants to suffer abuse like that. So what do you think kept you going?
I had learned my lessons from John Waters and his crew in Baltimore. I knew them a little bit. I wasn't, close with anybody, but I still consider John Waters a friend. And I wanted to see the other side, as Jim Morrison might say. I wanted to see what it was like to be a bohemian, and this was a place that I could do it. And there was a scene that much I knew, like, this is a scene. Whether people recognize it now or later, there were 15 or 20 bands that had their own sound and their own creativity, and you were inspired by that, and we all did better because there was safety in numbers, and it meant something. And there were a few writers and there was a few free papers that really helped out. So it was it gained momentum because of that. Christine McKenna wrote for the LA Times, and obviously Claude Bessy for Slash, and Chris Morris for the LA Reader, and stuff like that. So there was everybody did something. If you made posters, if you made flyers, if you did screen printing, or you were a performance artist, Johanna Wendt was right up there with all the other punk rock bands and the Kipper Kids and this, just weird shit. So that was exciting and definitely a moment in time.
When did X start to become something that was known outside of Los Angeles? I mean, I was a kid growing up in the mid-90s in Prince George's County, Maryland, not too far away from Baltimore. And I listened to X. I knew all about X. And so eventually this music would become, very influential nationally and internationally. When did that begin to happen? And how did that feel?
Oh, you felt a little, moments of vindication, moments of, but I don't know, we're still a little too offbeat for, prime time. And that's okay. We never had a, bona fide hit like, Blondie or Joan Jett or someone like that. But that's okay too, because then you don't suffer that, aren't you play that good song? Play the one that I know,
Right.
I would say probably when we got onto Elektra Records, so 82, it began, but Elektra didn't really know what to do with us either. So that's okay. And we toured a lot, not by today's standards. We didn't do, we didn't tour for 8 months out of the year. We would do, a couple times around the country and then, okay, time to make a new record. Which we did for like the first 4 years, 80, 81, 82, 83. Put out 4 records and they're good. We were on a roll. I don't know. I think not to be self-promoting, but I think doing those 2 LA music books has put another stake in the ground for LA punk rock and the sort of music that came after that with alt country and Paisley Underground and things like that.
You're referring to the books that you wrote with Tom DeSavia?
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I can see that. Although I will say, just as a listener from the outside looking in, I mean, it's always just been, it's been in the air and in the water. If you're someone that listens to music, it's interesting to me. When did your post-X career would start to really start to incorporate roots music in a way that now it's almost like a familiar path to trod? You see a lot of guys who are in like hardcore bands in like the 90s and early 2000s eventually go forward with more of like a roots singer-songwriter career. It's a little bit more well-trod now. It was not at all well-trod. It was not trod in any way, I feel like. When you started going solo, how did you find that direction? And do you feel like you were kind of trailblazing at that point, or were there some North Stars in front of you that you were following?
I don't know. It was probably had more in common with like John Mellencamp or something, which was odd to take that path right as the Seattle sound was exploding. I think people do it that are in punk rock or hard rock or something like that because they can get it. They can be convincing, or they can get away with it. If I tried to do a hip hop record or it would be people's bullshit meter would go immediately. Well, maybe they wouldn't nowadays. I don't think people have any any ability to call bullshit on anything. But yeah, I think it's just like what you love and what you feel like you can deliver in a heartfelt or convincing way. So yeah, that's just the way it happened, maybe John Hyatt was one of those people that had already kind of gone there. But it was just a natural progression.
What did it feel like to have worked, with X? You're talking about that period of, like, let's say, 80 or 81 to 83, where all you're doing is touring and making records with X. What did it feel like to, go forward on your own? That had to be a scary split to a certain degree.
Yes. Maybe the most daunting part is when you get signed to Geffen Records, like a lot of us did. Peter Case got signed, and I did, and they just, because they just had more money than they knew what to do with. And you can do anything you want. You have a huge budget, and you had I had a touring budget. It's like, that would never happen. Well, maybe it does. I don't know. But anyway, so the sky's the limit. You can hire anybody you want. You can do anything you want. And that is, that's hard, because you come from a place where you've got two guitars. Do you want to use the main bass guitar that you use, or do you want to use the other one? Do you want to use the main amp you use, or, right. So you have limited and that kind of a boundary. You have a limited choices. That kind of boundary helps you out. And I don't think I discovered what kind of music I wanted to do until I started working on until the first Yep Rock record, which I don't know which year that was. Oh. It was called Forever Hasn't Happened Yet. Maybe 20, I don't know, 2005 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I had made 3 or 4 records before that. I mean, the Geffen record to me was just way overproduced, and more is better, and it's not. And mm-hmm. this Fables in a Foreign Land is exactly the opposite. Like I finally understood less is more. It's like, oh, you mean that is that's the meaning of that phrase?
Yeah.
Cool. I think I'll try that. So yeah, the Yep Rock records, the 3 of those were very that's kind of when I think I found my voice, or whatever you want to call it.
It's interesting to me that you conceptualize your period in kind of the 90s there in that way, because I think your career is very unusual in that you have some people who have a voice very early on and they hit it and they get it figured out, but then they don't do anything later. Then you have artists who, it takes them a long time to hit, but once they finally do hit, they're the musical equivalent of Rodney Dangerfield, who figured it out when he was 55 years old, but once he did find it, he had it exactly right. There's pretty much nobody that, kind of did both things. And I think, like with X, and then with these most recent records that you're talking about, and I would, I guess the Yep Rock era would be a great place to put your finger on it. You've kind of done both things. What did you have to learn in that middle period to be able to do that? Like, what lessons had to come across in that 10 or 15 year period to not only find your voice again, but kind of just find an entirely new voice that was authentic to you?
I honestly don't know. I think it's just you try something and then you listen to it later and think, yeah, there's a part of that that's good, but all of it's not. It all doesn't stick together. There's this song, and there's that song, and there's another song, and then there's the one that you liked at first, and it actually came out pretty good in your recording. And I don't know. I honestly don't. I think it's just maturity, maybe, and figuring out what probably didn't work. Yeah.
So one of the things that didn't work, you feel like you've already mentioned, it's sort of the idea when there's too many choices and you kind of end up in overproduction land. Were there any other things that like you can specifically think of and you're like, that didn't work either?
Oh, I was seduced by indie rock. Amy Mann or people I still respect, the Pixies, or some of the stuff that came out of Boston, Lemonheads and things like that, because it still had edge. It was very songwriterly. It wasn't all that rootsy. And I was also seduced by the electric guitar. That's a very seductive instrument. And you start playing that, and then it's like, ooh, I'm not even any good, and it sounds good. I kind of suck at this, but it still sounds good. And so those the ones before, I think with this Forever Hasn't Happened Yet record, it's just like, oh, I'm going to lean into writing a blues song. I'm going to lean into, I'm going to accept the fact that I can be good at some croony roots stuff. And I don't have to prove that I'm a badass to anybody. So maybe those are the lessons that I learned, is that I accept who you are and just do that, which is kind of what we did for the X record, the most recent X record. Yeah. We didn't try to and I've never tried to reinvent myself. I've just tried to, be a good version of whatever I think that is. So yeah.
Getting better at your instrument is an essential part of being a songwriter. When you play better guitar, you write better songs. It's that simple. How do you do that, though? Sure, you could get lessons from the neighbor who majored in jingle writing at Harvard School of Music, but that would cost you an arm and a leg. Or else you could pull up YouTube and pay nothing at all, but then you'll end up sifting through videos of nerds unironically weeping as they rip off the solo from Little Wing while simultaneously giving Jimi Hendrix backhanded compliments. What's the sweet spot in between? Peghead Nation, the online home for American roots music. They feature curated video workshops with world-class instructors on guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, upright bass, dobro, and ukulele. They have levels of instruction that meet the needs of both scrappy upstarts and grizzled veterans. And most importantly, all of it comes in at a low monthly subscription that actual strapped-for-cash songwriters can easily afford. To start taking classes yourself, head on over to pegheadnation.com to check out their 50 available courses and enter the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get your first month free. You can also send a gift subscription to the songwriter in your life or to the player in your band who needs a not-so-subtle hint about their playing prowess. Peghead Nation, when you play better guitar, you write better songs. It's that simple. John Doe has forged a career that has epitomized artistic integrity. When he was in Los Angeles with X in the early days, they were outcasts on purpose. When he began his solo career, he began pursuing roots music while the entire label apparatus was signing only grunge bands. That comes from a mindset that prizes artistic interest and excitement over all other considerations. And while that mindset might not always be great for the bottom line, it does wonders for an artist's day-to-day working life. And there's a portrait of what it feels like to live day-to-day with that mindset in a poem by Lee Young Lee. It's entitled From Blossoms. From Blossoms comes this brown paper bag of peaches we bought from the boy at the bend in the road where we turned toward signs painted peaches. From laden boughs, from hands, from sweet fellowship in the bins, comes nectar at the roadside, succulent peaches we devour, dusty skin and all, comes the familiar dust of summer, dust we eat. Oh, to take what we love inside, to carry within us an orchard, to eat not only the skin, but the shade, not only the sugar, but the days, to hold the fruit in our hands, adore it, then bite into the round jubilance of peach. There are days we live as if death were nowhere in the background, from joy to joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to impossible blossom, to sweet, impossible blossom. You've collaborated very successfully over the years with many different artists, not only, the other members of X, but, I know you wrote songs with Dave Alvin in that scene coming up and many others since. What do you think it takes on an artist's individual end? What does it take to collaborate successfully with another artist where there's really some give and take?
To be open. Not to hold on to an idea tightly. And, the same things that make you a successful or a satisfied or reasonably complete person, where you have to be vulnerable, you have to listen to what your friend or partner is saying instead of just pretending to listen. You have to be open to these ideas and not to be rigid. Drop your freaking ego and just do it.
But I've gotten so good at pretending to listen. That's a problem.
But you know what? They know.
They do.
Your
they
best
do.
friends
now,
and your partner knows, and then they go, hey, right here.
Yes.
Yes. And that's why you realize, that's when you realize that you actually do love them, and they actually love you because they just want you to be there with them. And that's yes. Another lesson, but for a different podcast.
It is. No, exactly. One of those collaborations, probably my favorite collaboration that you've done, it should be mentioned here because I haven't addressed this on the show yet, was with the Sadies, whose creative force, Dallas Good, just passed
Yes.
away unexpectedly, very tragically, very recently. I love that band, have for many years. I love your collaboration with them. Could you just speak for a moment to some of the things that you remember the most from those sessions with them and from Dallas in particular?
Well, I just went to Toronto for a memorial for him, and it was rewarding and sad. I remember that Dallas insisted on playing piano on a few songs that I thought, this is ludicrous. You're an okay piano player, but why in the world wouldn't you just be playing guitar on this? Stop the World and Let Me Off was one example. And then after listening to it, I realized that was exactly what it needed. It didn't need another beautiful bed of his spaced out reverb, echo, everything guitar. Dallas was a sweetheart. Everybody said so many beautiful things, and his family, once you're in, you're in. And, his parents, Bruce and Margaret, are surviving, and they're going to be fine. And the Sadies are surviving. They're Mike and Travis and Sean have been playing together. They're just releasing a new record.
That's right.
It was It's incredibly sad because he was young, and but I was very lucky to very fortunate that we followed through, because we played together at some at Lee's Palace in Toronto for some Yep Rock thing. I'm giving Yep Rock so much ink here, Jesus. Anyway, because they were on Yep Rock, I Just Made That Forever Hasn't Happened Yet record, and we played together, and we all got hammered and said we should make a record together, blah blah blah. But we did, and I'll give Dallas a lot of credit for that. He had a vision for it, and the rest of they had already backed up a few people. Oh, who is the guy from
Langford? John
yeah,
Langford
no, the kind of R&B dude, Andre Williams.
Yes, Andre Williams.
And so it's not, oh, well, we like country music, and so let's do it. And he was chose as many songs as we could get away with, that sounded. We tried to do like The Race Is On, and it was terrible. It was bad. We tried to do some other ones I can't remember, but we just did the ones that sounded good.
Well, you know what? I'd pay a lot of money to hear the scuttled version of The Race Is On with John
bad.
Doe and the Sadies.
It was very bad. But we all, we did it in the way a record's supposed to be made. We did it in about a week, and I was actually kind of suffering some laryngitis, some sort of vocal problems, which thank goodness I'm okay with. I think it was because I was getting divorced at the time. But anyway, it was a gas. They played, I sang, we did it all together. Then Dallas and Don Pyle mixed it, and I would listen to it in Bakersfield on my computer as they would be putting it down, and I'd, somehow they would send me something, and then it was fantastic. And maybe the saddest thing is that we all thought we would do it again, and we still may, but it won't be with Dallas, and,
right.
And that's super sad, but he did his thing. He lived and loved music and movies and cats, and he was very influential and gone too soon, but he definitely did his thing.
He did, and thank God for that. Let's talk a bit about this new record that has this new folk band. How do you think your writing for this record? How do you think your writing has changed the most over the years since early on with X and until right now with this most recent record?
This is probably the most disciplined and cohesive record, even though it doesn't have a begin. It has a beginning and an end. The middle can be a little foggy, muddy. It's not a straight narrative, but it's and I say, like, for the last 10 years with my own stuff and X's stuff, that been paying more attention to economy and paying more attention to the little prepositions and connecting words, and is it with, or is it between, or is it and, or is it but, or all those in or on, and all those kind of things really fascinate me, because there's a lot of juice in that.
Where do you think that like newfound emphasis on detail for you, like where did that come from? Like, was there a specific piece of art that has been inspiring you in that way, or it just came from within?
I don't know. I think just looking at stuff on a page, that's really important to me, to actually write it down and to cross it out. And I don't do a ton of editing, but I'm getting better at it, in like trying more options or more drafts rather than first draft, first thought, best thought, which is that Allen Ginsberg, somebody like that.
Wow, I always just assumed that it was like this kind of in the ether apocryphal quote. I didn't know that it actually had.
Maybe it does.
Someone famous.
Maybe I dreamed that.
That's if it. That sounds like something Ginsberg could have said.
But I think also the sound of this record came to be because of the lockdown. Kevin Smith, the bass player, plays with Willie Nelson, so he's gone or was gone half of every month. And Conrad Chacroon, the drummer, played with Patty Griffin. But I called Kevin in April or May of 2020 and said, "You're doing nothing, right?" And he goes, "Yes, I'm doing nothing." And I said, "What if I came over and we played on your patio?" And so we did. And then Conrad came, a month or two after that, and we just started working on stuff. And I had 3 or 4 songs, but we didn't have a PA and we didn't have microphones, and he was playing upright bass and Conrad would muffle his drums, and we just sang and played into the air. And when it came time, then we, eventually had 12 songs and went and recorded it the same way too, without headphones, without, and just had a bunch of mics. Steve Berlin helped produce it, and Dave Way also produced and engineered. And I've done 8, 9 records with Dave Way, and he's amazing. He also set this thing up so it could be put into this new surround sound called Sony Atmos.
Yes, the Atmos.
Which I guess has been used in movie theaters for a while, but they're just putting records into this.
It's really interesting. So for years, at first I thought that the Atmos thing, I was like, you know what? They've been talking about like technology, like, everyone's going to have 3D movies at home, and like the stuff never comes to pass. So when I heard about Atmos, I was like, you know what? It sounds like another couple $1,000s I got to pay to have a different mix made. Like, that's bullshit. I don't want to do it. But I think the real key thing, it's like the medium. What you have to realize is like 80% of people now are listening on AirPods, right? And AirPods now have the ability to play it in this, whatever it is, like 7.1, but like this more than stereo field. And I think now that I learned that, I'm like, okay, well, this sounds legit. And I think that this is going to have a difference.
Yeah, maybe. It definitely has the potential, because I've listened to it at at Dave Way's home studio, and he has 12 speakers all over the freaking room, and it does sound like you're sitting in the middle of the band. And yes. he's done some remixes of like Al Green and some jazz records and things like that, and you can evidently direct percentages of a track or of a sound towards different places, towards different speakers. It can be 40% left and right, and then 10% on the corners, and then a certain percent ahead or above or behind, and all this kind of crap. It's not hokey. It actually sounds good. So yeah, that's how we did it, and part of it was also just being tired of too much crap and people that play too many notes. Even though I played with great great players, it's just like, what about the song? What about just having, like, there's a middle part that's instrumental, but it doesn't have to have a lead. Just let let just what happened in the song sink in for like 3-4 bars. Cool. And you'll have something else to pay attention to.
We don't need the pentatonic scale for 15 seconds here, guys. All right. We can survive with that.
Yes.
Well, I guess I really appreciate your time here today. I guess one of the things that I just wanted to close with, that I wanted to know in this interview, you've been a part of the music business and show business in general over many, many decades now. You've been in many movies. What are some of the key lessons or key truths that you've learned along the way, these many decades of making a life in creative work? What are some of the things that you've taken away from it that you can say, I don't know a lot, but I know this to be true here about this thing?
Trust your intuition. And the more you can develop that, it also has to do with presence and other sort of Zen Buddhist practices, I suppose, even though I don't meditate very often. Trust your intuition. If something is happening artistically or personally, and it, like, you have this feeling, but you have to connect to that feeling. You have to actually be connected to your intuition, your heart, your chest. If you have a bad feeling about it, then it's probably wrong. You know, how many times have you been convinced, or someone has convinced you to put this part on the mix is good or whatever like that, and you're going like, yeah, you make a good case for it, but there's something that is, but you cave in and you say, okay, fine, that's cool, yeah, let's do that. And then 6 months or 6 years later, you go like, fuck, I knew that was wrong. I knew I hated that. I still don't like it. So yeah, intuition, and you can say no, and it's fine. You don't have to please people. All those sorts of positive. I think it's very important as a like 50 something, as you get into your 50s, to start liking yourself and appreciating things, and have a small amount of satisfaction, because otherwise you'll become bitter and angry, and nobody likes that. That's lame. It's no fun. Nobody wants to be around some, and to keep expanding, to keep your eyes and heart open and stuff, so that, because it's very easy to start closing down as you get older. We've all seen it, with our grandparents or parents, you end up living in like one room, and that sucks, and they don't seem very happy about it. So, yeah.
Well, I've gone through periods of bitterness and living in one room well before 50, so I don't know what that bodes for me, John.
Well, you look like you're doing good now. I like all the books and
Oh, thanks. Yeah, my little workspace down here. Well, listen, real honor to talk with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do the show. I very much appreciate
thanks for all your thoughtful questions and putting the work into that.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. John Doe's forthcoming album is entitled Fables in a Foreign Land, available everywhere music is sold or streamed on May 20th of this year. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.